Some companies are having difficulty getting their cloud consulting resources under control. Let's talk about that. So welcome back to the Cloud Computing Insider, where we talk about the realities of cloud computing and how to make it work for your enterprise. I'm your host, David Linthicum, author, speaker, B-list geek. Let's get going. So this one was, it'll be interesting to see how many people are going to watch this video and find it useful. And this kind of came from some requests that came from people I've been working with out in the industry in terms of how to get their cloud consulting and staff augmentation resources under better control as they move toward AI, as they move toward their third or fourth generations of cloud-based systems, and really reevaluating some of the help our services infrastructure, meaning human services, not cloud services, that are working with them to take their cloud game to the next level. And I think it's an interesting question, and I think that I'm happy to share some of my experiences with you. As you know, I started and sold a couple of consulting firms, worked for some big consulting firms, and worked, kind of half my career in the technology space as a technology CTO and the other half of my career as a consultant. And sometimes I was consuming cloud consulting resources. In other words, I was hiring them, and sometimes I was the cloud consulting resource. So let's look at each of the issues that I think are out there right now and how best to manage them now in 2025. Well, first, and kind of the obvious point, there's an increasing reliance on cloud consulting firms. And so it's estimated that by 2025, there will be a staggering 7.5 million unfulfilled cloud positions globally, according to Pluralsight. And the shortage of skilled professionals poses significant challenges for organizations seeking to harness the power of cloud computing and stay competitive in the digital landscape. And so what's occurring is that there's not enough qualified people out there to fill many of the jobs that I think some of these Global 2000 companies or government would like to have filled. So they're using outside staff augmentation firms, they're using outside consulting firms, which are typically going to be more expensive, but they're able, and they certainly have the capacity in many instances to fill those roles. And so, this is really a matter of using those resources more effectively at the end of the day. So if we're going to be dependent on staff augmentation firms and cloud consulting firms, what do we have to do to manage these resources to deliver value more effectively? And so what happened is over the last 12 years, consulting firms, again, generally speaking, have not delivered on the promise of cloud computing. And in the latest report, Sky High Hopes, Navigating the Barriers to Maximizing Cloud Value, Accenture, which is a consulting firm, which is interesting, surveyed 750 senior business and IT professionals at large enterprises across 11 industries and 17 countries. It found that just 37% of the companies say they are achieving full value as expected on their cloud investments. A mere 2% increased since Accenture's original research report in 2018. So this is not good news. In other words, we have a lot of cloud work being done, migrations, modernization, net new development using microservice-based systems, container-based systems, billions and billions of dollars out there spent on these areas, and the companies that are spending this money on consulting and staff augmentation and probably even some of the hiring are not getting the value that they thought they would be getting from cloud computing. So found that just 37% of companies say they are achieving the full value expected on their cloud investments. That's not good. And of course, there's worse news with the whole AI movement now for the last couple of years. According to McKinsey, 80% of of AI-based projects are failing. In other words, they're just putting on the shelf. And of course, it's early days with generative AI stuff, and so we're learning as we go. But it's a little weird that cloud computing has been around for a long period of time. I've been working with it since the early 2000s, and we haven't kind of figured out how to get to the point of bringing value, back to the companies that are leveraging these cloud computing resources. So let's take a look at what we can do to kind of make this a bit better. However, this is a reminder. This is typically a shared responsibility model. In other words, even though we're hiring consultants, people who are hiring the consultants bear some responsibility here. This is not a matter of you hiring a consulting organization and then not taking responsibility for how they're performing. So you have to manage them correctly. You have to set up the proper incentives correctly. You have to hire the right firms and all those sorts of things. And they're supposed to do a good job for you. So I'm not taking the pressure or putting all the onus on the consulting companies out there and consulting firms out there and staff augmentation firms out there. I'm putting this really on both sides. In other words, you have to be a good consumer of these services, and you have to be a good provider of these services. So let's get into the advice. The first is to be vigilant over technology recommendations. Understand the dynamics of the consulting firms recommending technologies, and also many of the firms out there have partnerships with existing cloud players, certainly the major cloud providers. And the big consulting firms out there all have relationship with Microsoft, Google, and Amazon Web Services, and you have to be wary of that. So understand there could be potential conflicts of interest when the consultants kind of turn into a sales organization. And be very concerned, by the way, if you're in the first meetings where you're kicking something off, when no one knows anything about anything at this point, and they start bringing up particular cloud solutions, AWS, Microsoft, Google, or even serverless solutions and container-based solutions, because that's normally going to be a red flag, is that they're pushing a particular technology, not because they're, in essence, trying to sell it for profit, but that may be their bias that they're bringing to the table there. And that's going to be bad news, because what if that technology is not going to be the most optimized way to build your systems? And they're not going to know that until they understand the requirements. So suggesting technology too early in the process should be a red flag with a consulting organization, that you reevaluate how they do it and perhaps set expectations accordingly. So develop criteria for evaluating technology recommendations, and make sure they understand that you're not going to tolerate being sold a technology, and you're not going to tolerate bias. So those things have to be eliminated. So you're getting an objective, truly trusted advisor that you're working with, which is going to tell you exactly what the right solution should be. Also, make sure to ensure business value from the engagement. So define clear objectives and expect outcomes for consulting projects. And you have to focus on measurable business impacts rather than just technological implementations. This is not a matter of getting something working. I can get something working if I have enough money and time, but this is a matter of you optimizing the technology solution to return the most value back to the business. Now, it's not always going to be 100% value that's returned to the business. It's not always going to be a perfect technological solution. That's the real world. But the metric should be set up that you're paying the consulting organizations, they understand this, for the ability to return business value. This is not about just getting something working. This is about getting something working that's most optimized for the business. So regular assessments of consulting engagements, auditing these things, and by the way, I do this all the time under contract to my clients to verify alignment with strategic objectives. In other words, is it healthy? Are they making the right decisions? Are they making objective decisions? Are they looking out for you? And are they looking out for the business value that they're contracted to bring back for you as the organization? And one of the things I love to do when I'm working with a consulting organization is tying compensation to business outcomes. So in other words, if we're going to do this, we need to be incentivized to return the most value back to the business. Therefore, I'm going to tie the return of value, and I have the metrics in order to measure it, to your compensation. So you can make a lot of money working with me if you're able to return a lot of business value. But if you aren't, that's not necessarily going to be a good business outcome for you. Those are tough to sell, certainly with some of the larger organizations, because they don't like risk. And if they look at something like that, it has a tendency to appear arbitrary to them and therefore fairly risky. But you can set it up in such a way where the metrics are clearly understood, the assessments clearly understood, and everybody understands, both the organization consuming the consulting services and the consulting services producing the consulting services, that this needs to be the objective. So create benchmarks and key performance indicators, KPIs, that are linked to business results. Understand they're going to be compensated based on those, and align the consultant's incentive with the achievement of the desired business outcomes. This is not about you just completing the project. Anybody can do that. This is about you completing the project with a technological solution, a cloud solution in this case, that's going to provide the most business value. And we have the metrics to prove that. And if you do that, you're going to be compensated. And if you don't, you're not. Why not? So next would be enhancing accountability and transparency. Foster a transparent relationship with a consulting firm to assure accountability. So you need to have regular audits in many instances with outside organizations. I work with a lot of organizations where I come in at certain times, evaluate what the firms are doing, how they're proceeding with an architecture, whether it's building a generative AI system, migrating a cloud system, building a net new cloud-based system, and how are they living up to the expectations that are being set by both parties. So have to implement regular performance reviews and progress reports, encourage consultants to take a shared responsibility for reaching the business targets. So again, the consumers of the consulting services are not off the hook here. They have to look for key metrics to see if everything's running as it's planned to run, and that there's regular points of accountability where people are doing reports and reviews that we're proceeding in a healthy way. It's a common thing that I see. Well, people will wait a year, sometimes 2 years into a project where they start doing this and assessing the value that's being delivered. By that time, if something is gone awry, it's too late. And so you're looking for these points of accountability so you're able to correct and adjust to make sure that you're getting the value that's being brought back to the business. So next would be building a collaborative partnership. This truly has to be a partnership. Of course, we're putting metrics involved. We're doing accountability. We're doing performance reviews. But at the end of the day, you're working with a consulting company. There has to be a culture of trust between you and the firm. So they understand that they're part of a collaborative effort rather than just, isolated actors. We're not treating them as enemies. We're treating them as friends. We do have to treat them in a professional way and conduct ourselves in a professional way, certainly with the accountability stuff. But you're looking for an organization you can put trust into. So evolve your internal teams with the consulting process for better integration and shared knowledge. This should be a collaborative effort between you and the consulting firm to make sure everybody's learning from the experience. And I think that's always going to be a step in the right direction. So you're not just using them and keeping them at arm's length, but you're treating them as somebody that's a part of the team. Establish open communication channels to facilitate ongoing dialogue and improvements. In other words, you're making friends. And consulting firms, by the way, are pretty good at doing this. They like making friends with their consultants, with their clients, and maintain those friendships and maintain those relationships over a long period of time. Be careful with those. Make sure they're not going to, come back and bite you. But it is good to have a collaborative and open dialogue with your consulting partners to make sure you understand each other's issues and that you're resolving them and you have informal communication channels to resolve them. And finally, continuous improvement and adaptation. Continuously evaluate the effectiveness of the consulting engagements and adjust as needed. So again, let's not wait a year or 2 years into the process to realize we have a problem. We have a communication problem. We have a skills gap problem. We have a technological bias problem. We have something that's causing things to go off kilter because it's just going to get worse, by the way. And those are very difficult things to fix if they get too far down the track. They just become very expensive. In fact, I think a lot of the failures that we've seen in the cloud computing world are a matter of some of these firms getting way off track with their ability to deliver value with cloud-based systems. The organization that's consuming the consulting services didn't call them on it, and they just ended up making a bigger and bigger mistake. And finally, they implemented a large mistake. And that's why we have these systems that cost 2.5 times as much as we thought they were, and why we're doing repatriation these days. We just left these things get way too far off track and continue to bleed money, and we didn't bother to fix them. Now we have to loop back and fix them. You want to catch those before they become issues. Stay informed on industry trends, anticipate shifts in cloud practices, understand where things are going. Certainly, utilization of generative AI systems, generative AI-based tools are there now. How do we use them? Which things are viable, which are not viable? Encourage a culture of adaptability and incorporate lessons learned from past engagements. In other words, and this is a big one. If you've been burned over the last 15 years in dealing with cloud consulting companies and staff augmentation firms because they've led you astray in building the wrong technological solutions, you still have to leverage them today because you can't get all the skills you need to build these systems. That's a clue. So make sure you evaluate what went wrong with those engagements, what went wrong with those projects, and don't repeat them. because that'd be awful embarrassing. If fool me, once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, kind of a thing. And I do see a lot of these engagements which are on track for, disappointing larger organizations for sometimes the fifth, sixth, seventh time. And that should not be allowable. So where do you go from here? Well, monitor, have a relationship, have visibility into how the projects are running and how to set them up, and make sure you're communicating with your consulting organization or your staff augmentation firm as to what you expect from them. And it's very clear. You're also communicating a culture of accountability. So in other words, it's going to be trust but verify, and your ability to go in there and figure out how these projects are progressing and how they're evaluating the metrics and how they're going to be planning on returning value back to the business to get to a solution that's going to be as close to 100% optimized as it can be. It's never going to be 100% optimized, but it should be a lot more optimized than some of these mistakes we made in the past. Emphasize the necessity for aligning consultant incentives to the business achievements. And so, in other words, put incentives. Those are great things to do if they're working toward a bonus around business value or the ability to get paid full fee based on proof of business value. Those are going to be different types of relationships than if they're just set off on their own to build their systems. And some companies do that. They just hire a consulting firm, they give them the requirements, and they let them go. And there's no monitoring until the technological solution comes back. There has to be accountability. There has to be core metrics. There has to be shared risk in a lot of this stuff. And then finally, encouraging an ongoing commitment to refining and optimizing consulting partnerships. And again, long-term success is you setting up and creating a relationship with a consulting firm. It doesn't matter if it's a big consulting firm, big firm, like some of the ones I work for, or a small boutique consulting firm or staff augmentation firm or something in between. You have to set up a relationship of trust with them. Make sure you're working with people you have confidence in, respect for, and they have the same thing in you. Well, that's all I have this week. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to check out my InfoWorld blog. Also, check out my course out on Go Collide Careers, my generative AI architecture course. Having a lot of fun out there. Please join us there. Also, check out my courses on LinkedIn Learning, dropping a lot of new ones coming up, a lot of things on agentic AI and generative AI and use of cloud computing with those technologies. I'm very excited about that. And finally, check out my book, Insider's Guide to Cloud Computing, where I write about most of the stuff we talk about on this show. So until next time, you guys stay very safe. Talk to you soon. Bye.